Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku joined the Survey Corps? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was a symphony of chaos, a cacophony of screaming sirens, crumbling concrete, and the high-pitched whine of straining metal. For Izuku Midoriya, it was just another Tuesday. Green lightning, a familiar and welcome storm, crackled across his skin. He moved like a thunderclap, a blur of motion and wind pressure. His costume, the upgraded Gamma version, was scarred and dusted with the debris of half a city block, but it held firm. He was using one for all, full cowling at a steady 12%, a comfortable rhythm he could now maintain without his bones screaming in protest. The power thrummed under his skin, a chorus of past heroes singing in his blood. "It's over, Void Walker!" Deku yelled, his voice cutting through the din. He skidded to a halt on a fractured slab of asphalt, his iron-soled boots grinding against the stone. "You can't run anymore! Please, just surrender. We can get you help." The villain, a man in a shimmering, oil-slick-colored bodysuit that seemed to warp the light around him, stumbled back. His name was Kenji Tanaka, and his quirk, Spatial Rend, allowed him to tear small holes in the fabric of reality. He'd been using it for a series of high-stakes robberies, but a simple bank heist had escalated, and now he was a cornered animal. Panic radiated from him in waves. "Help?" Void Walker laughed, a sound like tearing paper. "There's no help for me. They'll lock me in Tartarus and throw away the key. I won't be caged." Behind Deku, the imposing figure of All Might landed with a ground-shaking thud, his very presence a beacon in the dust-choked air. He was in his muscle form, but the strain was visible at the edges of his smile. "He is right, young Midoriya. It is over. Surrender peacefully, son. There is always a path to redemption." Void Walker looked from the symbol of peace to the determined young hero, and something inside him snapped. Desperation, pure and absolute, flared in his eyes. "If I can have my freedom," he shrieked, his hands clawing at the air in front of him, "then neither can your precious successor." The air didn't just shimmer, it screamed. A pinprick of absolute blackness appeared between Void Walker's hands, then violently expanded. It wasn't a clean portal. It was a maelstrom, a vortex of tearing space-time, colors bleeding into non-colors, sounds warping into deafening silence and back again. The laws of physics were being shredded. "Get back!" All Might bellowed, moving to shield civilians. Deku's instincts took over. He couldn't let that vortex destabilize in the middle of a populated area. He pushed full cowling to 20%, the power surging with a familiar, painful spike. "I have to close it," he thought, leaping forward. The pull was instantaneous and utterly overwhelming. It wasn't like a magnet or a vacuum. It felt like every atom in his body was being individually yanked in a different direction. The ground beneath his feet tore away, sucked into the churning abyss. "It's unstable!" Void Walker screamed, his own body beginning to distort as he lost control. "I can't!" Deku reached him, grabbing the villain's arm. "You have to close it! Focus!" But it was too late. The vortex, hungry and chaotic, latched onto them both. Deku saw a flash of pure terror on Kenji Tanaka's face before the man's form dissolved into a spray of light and shadow, consumed by his own creation. The pull on Deku intensified 100-fold. His feet left the ground. The world became a smear of color and noise. Through the roaring chaos, one sound pierced the veil, a voice that was his guiding star, his entire world. "Young Midoriya, All Might!" He was reaching for him, his hand outstretched, his face a mask of horror. Deku reached back, his fingers straining, stretching, desperate for that anchor. But there was nothing. Only the cold, violent pull of the void. The last thing Izuku Midoriya saw of his world was the desperate, outstretched hand of his hero. Then, the universe tore itself apart, and he knew only a screaming, agonizing blackness. Pain. It was the first sensation. Not the sharp, clean break of a bone from overusing his quirk, but a deep, cellular agony, as if he'd been disassembled and hastily put back together in the wrong order. His mind was a fog, a swirling miasma of disconnected images. All Might's face, his mother's smile, Uraraka's laugh, the tearing fabric of reality. He was lying on something soft and damp. Earth. He could smell it, rich and loamy, mixed with the scent of wet leaves and something else, something foul and coppery, like an old slaughterhouse. He tried to call on One for All, to feel that familiar warmth spread through him, but there was nothing. A hollow, terrifying silence echoed where a symphony should have been. It felt like trying to flex a phantom limb. The power, the legacy that had become as much a part of him as his own heartbeat, was gone. Or not gone. Dormant. He could feel the faintest, most distant ember of it, a single dying coal at the bottom of a cold and empty furnace. The violent transit had severed his connection, damaged the intricate wiring between his soul and the power of the vestiges. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. He forced his eyes open. The world was muted. The sky was a vast, unbroken canvas of pale, washed-out blue, a stark contrast to the vibrant, almost electric skies of home. Towering in the distance, so colossal it broke the horizon, was a wall. A wall of impossible scale, stone gray and monolithic, stretching as far as he could see in either direction. It was utterly devoid of the chrome and glass of the cities he knew. There were no skyscrapers, no advertisements, no contrails from airplanes. Just the wall, the empty sky, and an endless expanse of green and brown plains. A low, rhythmic thudding sound drew his attention. Thump. 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 It sounded heavy. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. His hero costume was in tatters, the advanced fibers shredded, the armored plates cracked. And then he saw it. About 200 meters away, a figure was lurching across the plain. It was humanoid, but grotesquely so. It stood perhaps 10 meters tall, its limbs too long and spindly for its bloated torso, its head too large. It had a disturbingly childlike face, stretched into a fixed, vapid grin. Its eyes were huge, vacant, and utterly devoid of intelligence. It was naked, possessing no discernible reproductive organs, a horrifying caricature of a human being. Deku's blood ran cold. This wasn't a villain. It wasn't a mutation quirk. This was something fundamentally wrong. The uncanny valley wasn't deep enough to contain the primal horror this thing evoked. It was an abomination. He scrambled backward, his breath catching in his throat. His analytical mind, his greatest asset, was screaming at him. Analyze. Observe. Formulate a plan, but his hindbrain, the part that knew only fear, had taken over. He was a 15-year-old boy, stripped of his power, facing a monster from a nightmare he couldn't wake from. The creature, the Titan, turned its head. Its vacant eyes fixed on him. The grin seemed to widen. It changed course, its shambling gait picking up speed. Thump. 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 Deku froze. The sludge villain. Muscular. Overhaul. He had faced them all. He had felt fear, but this was different. This was the absolute, paralyzing terror of prey. He was just meat. The ground began to tremble, not just from the approaching giant, but from a different source. A fast, frantic drumming. Hoofbeats. A chorus of them. Titan spotted 200 meters. On the boy's position. Intercept squad, now! A voice roared, sharp and commanding. From the direction of the Great Wall, a group of riders crested a small hill. They moved with breathtaking speed, their green cloaks emblazoned with a strange insignia. 2 wings, one white, one blue, whipping behind them. They were a whirlwind of motion. Before Deku could fully process what was happening, several figures launched themselves from their horses. Wires shot from devices at their hips, sinking into the Titan's flesh with sickening thuds. They reeled themselves in, moving through the air with a three-dimensional grace that defied belief, like spiders weaving a web around their prey. Gas hissed from their gear. The sunlight glinted off the long, rectangular blades they held in each hand. One of them, a man with sharp, intense eyes and sandy brown hair, soared towards the Titan's back. He spun in the air, a cyclone of green fabric and gleaming steel. "This is the fate of all who live outside the walls," he bellowed, more to himself than anyone else. With 2 fluid, brutal slashes, he carved a massive chunk of flesh from the nape of the Titan's neck. The giant stumbled, its forward momentum carrying it for a few more steps. A geyser of steam erupted from the wound, smelling of boiling blood. The creature froze, its grin sagging, and then it toppled forward, crashing to the earth with a sound that shook Deku to his core. As it lay there, its massive body began to dissolve into steam, leaving behind nothing but a steaming, oversized skeleton that would soon evaporate. The soldiers landed softly on the ground around Deku, their expressions grim, their blades dripping. The man who had struck the final blow, clearly their commander, stalked over to him. He was tall, built like a whipcord, and his eyes held a weary intensity that spoke of countless horrors witnessed. He knelt, his gaze sweeping over Deku's ruined costume, his strange green hair, and his look of utter shock. "It's alive," the commander said, his voice a low growl. He looked at Deku, his expression unreadable. "Can you talk, boy? Where did you come from?" Deku opened his mouth, his throat dry. He tried to form the words in Japanese. "Watashi wa." But what came out was different. The words felt foreign on his tongue, yet they were perfectly formed, understood. I don't know." The commander's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "He speaks our tongue. Look at his clothes. Never seen fabric like this. He's not from within the walls." He holstered his blades and stood, motioning for two of his soldiers. "Get him on a horse. He's coming with us. The garrison can figure out what to do with this mess." As they lifted him, his body screaming in protest, Deku's gaze fell upon the steaming skeleton of the Titan, rapidly vanishing into nothing. He looked back at the colossal wall, a prison masquerading as a sanctuary. The silence of one for all in his soul was a gaping wound. He had fallen out of his world and into hell. The city of Shiganshina was a sensory assault. After the unnerving emptiness of the plains, the cramped, bustling streets were claustrophobic. The buildings were made of timber and stucco, packed together in a chaotic jumble. The smell of wood smoke, livestock, and unwashed humanity hung thick in the air. People stared as the Survey Corps squad rode through, their gazes a mixture of awe, pity, and resentment. They muttered about tax money and suicide missions. Deku, riding awkwardly behind a stone-faced soldier, took it all in. The technology was pre-industrial, yet they had those incredible gas-powered grappling hooks. The people lived in fear, huddled behind a wall like cattle in a pen. This world was a tapestry of contradictions, and he was the most glaring one of all. He was taken to a grim, stone building flying the flag of the garrison regiment, 2 roses behind a shield. Inside, he was placed in a sparse interrogation room. The commander, whom he'd heard the others call Keith Shadis, sat opposite him. "Let's try this again," Shadis said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Your name, Izuku Midoriya." The name felt strange, spoken in this foreign yet familiar language. The travel through the void must have done something to his brain, a bizarre, instantaneous translation function. "And where are you from, Izuku Midoriya?" Here was the problem. The truth was insane. A lie would be impossible to maintain. He opted for a fractured, desperate honesty. "I'm from a place very far away. A nation called Japan." Shadis' expression didn't change. "There is no such nation within the 3 walls. Are you from beyond them?" "Yes." "No. It's a different world, a different world," Shadis repeated, his voice flat. He leaned forward, his intensity palpable. "Listen to me, boy. We deal with monsters that eat us for sport. We don't have time for fantasies. Your clothes are made of a material nobody has ever seen. You were found alone in Titan territory, yet you are alive. You will give me straight answers, or I will let you rot in a cell until you do." Deku's mind raced. How could he explain quirks? Heroes? A society so advanced it viewed a 50-foot wall as a historical curiosity? "Where I'm from, people are different," Deku began, his voice trembling slightly. "Some are born with special abilities. We call them quirks. We have people whose job it is to fight those who use their powers for evil. They're called heroes." Shadis stared at him for a long, silent moment. Then he sighed, a deep, weary sound, and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "So, you're either a liar, a lunatic, or you've hit your head so hard you've invented a new reality. Given the circumstances, any are possible." The door opened, and a garrison officer entered, speaking to Shadis in a low tone. Shadis nodded. "Take him to the infirmary. Get Dr. Ansel to check him over." And see if you can get Jaeger to take a look. This might be more in his line of work. Deku was escorted to a small, clean infirmary. A portly, balding doctor named Ansel clucked his tongue as he examined Deku's bruises and the strange, latticework scars on his arms, faint, silvery remnants from his early, bone-breaking days with One for All. Remarkable muscle density, Ansel muttered, prodding Deku's bicep. And these healed fractures, the patterning is bizarre. You're built like a prize fighter, boy. An hour later, another man entered. He was tall, with dark hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and wore spectacles. There was a quiet intensity about him, a calmness that seemed out of place in this grim world. But behind his glasses, his eyes were sharp, analytical, and held a deep, profound sadness. I am Dr. Grisha Jaeger, he said, his voice even and gentle. Commander Shades asked me to consult. He said you had a unique story. Deku, exhausted and bone-weary, found himself looking at a man who projected intelligence and curiosity, not suspicion. He decided to try again. He explained everything, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke of his world, of Yue Hai, of All Might, of the battle with Voidwalker. He left out the specifics of One for All, framing it simply as his own super-strength quirk. Grisha listened patiently, his expression unchanging. He examined the tattered remains of Deku's costume, rubbing the synthetic fabric between his fingers. He gently touched the cracked armor plating on Deku's shoulder. Fascinating, Grisha said softly when Deku finished. A polymer blend fabric, far beyond our textile capabilities. This armor, some kind of ceramic composite? And you claim a significant portion of your population possesses these quirks? About 80%. Deku confirmed, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. This man wasn't dismissing him. He was listening. And your own quirk, this enhancement of strength and speed, is currently non-functional? Deku's face fell. Yes. I can't feel it. The travel must have damaged it. Grisha looked at Deku, his gaze piercing. You speak of a world of heroes, yet you have the eyes of a soldier. You've seen things no boy your age should. He paused. I cannot prove your story. To everyone else, you are a strange boy who appeared from nowhere. The military police would likely dissect you. But I believe that you are not lying. Your confusion and your grief are genuine. Grisha turned to Dr. Ansel. He is no immediate threat. He is, however, a medical and anthropological anomaly. I would like to take him into my care for observation. I can vouch for him. Ansel, clearly relieved to be rid of the problem, agreed immediately. Shades, when informed, gave his grudging consent, with the caveat that Deku was not to leave Shiganshina. And so, Izuku Midoriya, a hero in training from a world of wonders, found himself a ward of a quiet, enigmatic doctor in a city at the edge of a world besieged by monsters. Grisha Jaeger gave him a simple room in his home, a set of plain clothes, and 3 simple rules. Don't draw attention, don't speak of his old world to anyone else, and help Carla, his wife, with chores. The Jaeger home was a small pocket of warmth in a cold world. Carla Jaeger, Grisha's wife, was a kind woman with a warm smile and worried eyes. She fussed over Deku, ensuring he ate, her maternal instincts overriding any suspicion about the strange boy her husband had brought home. It was on his second day there that the door to the house burst open. I'm home! And those garrison idiots were mocking the Survey Corps again, calling them suicidal fools. They don't understand anything. A boy stormed in, his face a mask of righteous fury. He had brown hair and startlingly intense, teal-green eyes that burned with a fire Deku recognized instantly. It was the fire of someone who wanted to change the world, the same fire he saw in his own reflection. The boy stopped short when he saw Deku sitting at the kitchen table. Who are you? He demanded, his anger immediately replaced by blunt curiosity. Eren, be polite, Carla chided gently. This is Izuku. He'll be staying with us for a while. Eren, Grisha said, emerging from his study. This is Izuku Midoriya. He is a guest. Eren Jaeger's eyes narrowed, sizing Deku up. Behind him, a second figure slipped quietly into the house. A girl with straight, black hair and a calm, almost unnervingly placid face. She wore a red scarf and her dark gray eyes immediately fixed on Eren, then shifted to assess Deku as a potential threat. "And this is Mikasa Ackerman, my adopted daughter," Grisha added. "Hello?" Deku said, offering a small, tired smile. "Why are you here?" Eren asked, blunt as a hammer. "Eren!" Carla snapped. "It's okay," Deku said. "I got lost. Your father is helping me." Eren's gaze was still suspicious, but his attention was easily diverted. He launched back into his tirade about the Survey Corps, about the foolishness of living like cattle, about wanting to see the outside world. Deku listened, a profound sense of dread coiling in his gut. This boy, Eren, was all passion and fire, a burning desire for freedom. It was a noble spirit, a heroic spirit. But in this world, Deku suspected that such a spirit could be a self-destructive inferno. Later that afternoon, another boy came to the door. He was small, with a blonde bob of hair and wide, cornflower blue eyes that held a universe of curiosity. "Eren! I got the book," he said, his voice soft and hesitant. "Armin!" Eren grinned. "Come in. We have a weird guy staying with us." Armin Arlert entered, clutching a worn book. He froze when he saw Deku, intimidated. "It's nice to meet you, Armin," Deku said, his voice gentle, trying not to spook the timid boy. The four of them ended up in the Jaeger's small yard. Eren, predictably, wanted to know if Deku could fight. Mikasa sat nearby, watching Eren, her expression a careful blank. Armin, however, was fascinated. "Your accent is strange," Armin noted. "And your name?" "Midoriya. It's not like any name I've ever heard. I'm from very far away," Deku said, sticking to the official story. "Is it true what my grandpa's book says?" Armin asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "That the outside world is full of amazing things? Giant lakes of salt water, fields of ice, sand that goes on forever?" Deku's heart ached with a sudden, sharp pang of homesickness. He thought of the beaches where he'd cleaned up trash, the winter snowfalls, the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. "Yes," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's all true. And more." The awe on Armin's face was a beautiful, fragile thing. Eren looked invigorated. "See! It's real! We have to see it!" Deku looked at these three children. Eren, the passionate heart. Mikasa, the silent protector. Armin, the brilliant, curious mind. They were the hope of this world, young and unbroken. But he had seen the grinning, mindless face of a titan. He knew what lay outside their wall. He saw their future, and it was painted in shades of blood and terror. In that moment, a new sense of purpose began to settle over his grief. He might have lost his power. He might be trapped in a waking nightmare. But he was still Deku. He was still the boy who ran to save Bakugo from the sludge villain when he was quirkless. He was still the hero who would throw himself into danger to save one person. That night, alone in the small room Grisha had given him, the crushing silence of his dormant quirk felt heavier than ever. He felt useless, powerless. His hands, which could once shatter concrete, now trembled with helplessness. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and wait for disaster. His eyes fell on a blank notebook and a piece of charcoal Grisha had given him, suggesting he write down his thoughts. An old, familiar habit sparked to life. His most reliable tool had never been his fists, but his mind. He picked up the notebook. The cover was plain, brown cardboard. He pressed the charcoal to it, his writing neat and precise, a stark contrast to the chaos in his soul. Titan Analysis for the Future, Volume 1. He opened it to the first page. His hand hesitated for a moment, the memory of the creature's vacant grin flashing in his mind. He pushed the fear down, replacing it with cold, hard analysis. This was what he was good at. This was how he could fight back. He began to write. Subject Alpha, observation from 200 m distance. Classification, approximate, 10-meter class. Physical characteristics, disproportionate humanoid form. Elongated limbs, bloated torso. Head oversized with unnaturally wide, fixed grin. Eyes vacant, suggesting lack of higher intelligence or reasoning. Behavioral patterns, drawn to human presence. Initial gait was slow and shambling, but increased in speed upon spotting a target. No apparent self-preservation instinct. Weakness, eradicated by a deep incision at the nape of the neck. Wound produced immense amount of steam. Body sublimated post-mortem, leaving only a rapidly evaporating skeletal structure. Why the nape? Is it a centralized nervous system? A structural weak point? Further data required. He kept writing, filling the page with questions, theories, and observations. As his hand moved, a tiny bit of the crushing weight on his shoulders began to lift. He wasn't a powerhouse anymore. He wasn't the next symbol of peace. But as he looked down at the scribbled notes, he saw a glimmer of who he still was. He was an analyst. He was a strategist. And in a world besieged by mindless giants, maybe, just maybe, a sharp mind was a weapon more potent than any quirk. He was trapped in a world without color, a world of gray walls and muted skies, but he would be damned if he let its darkness extinguish the fire in his own heart. He would learn, he would prepare, and he would save them. He had to. A year can be both an eternity and the blink of an eye. For Izuku Midoriya, it had been a crucible. The initial shock had receded, leaving behind a hard, dense stone of acceptance in his gut. He was trapped. There was no way home. The realization hadn't come in a single, crushing epiphany, but in a slow, grinding erosion of hope over months of quiet desperation. Every night, he would sit in his small room in the Jaeger household, close his eyes, and reach for one for all. And every night, he would be met with the same profound, hollow silence. The embers were still there, a ghost of warmth in the abyss of his soul, but they refused to catch. The divine chorus of the vestiges was gone, replaced by a single, mournful note he could barely hear. He was, for all intents and purposes, quirkless again. And it was terrifying. But Izuku Midoriya was not one to be defined by his limitations. He had been quirkless once before, and even then, his spirit had refused to break. Now, he had something he hadn't possessed as a child, a body forged in the fires of UA's training, a mind sharpened by combat analysis, and the memory of power. His days fell into a rigorous, self-imposed routine. He would wake before dawn, the air cool and smelling of damp earth. His training was a silent, desperate prayer. He would run the perimeter of the Shiganshina district, his iron-soled boots from his world, the only piece of his old gear he'd kept, a constant reminder, pounding a steady rhythm against the cobblestones. The garrison guards on the wall would watch the strange, green-haired boy with a mixture of amusement and bewilderment as he lapped the entire city, his stamina seeming endless. Then came the calisthenics. Push-ups until his arms screamed and trembled, sit-ups until his core felt like a hot iron brand, squats and lunges until his legs were jelly. He was maintaining the machine, keeping the engine of his body tuned to its absolute peak, because it was the only weapon he had left. His afternoons were spent with the Jaegers. He had become an indelible part of their household. Carla, after her initial apprehension, had adopted him with a fierce maternal energy. He helped her with chores, his MHA strength making tasks like carrying water from the well or chopping firewood startlingly easy. He was polite, endlessly grateful, and his quiet, earnest nature had completely won her over. His relationship with Grisha was more complex. The doctor was often away on his rounds to the inner districts, but when he was home, he and Izuku would speak for hours. Grisha was endlessly fascinated by Izuku's knowledge of medicine and human anatomy, which, by the standards of this world, was centuries advanced. Izuku, in turn, found a quiet mentor in the enigmatic doctor. He absorbed Grisha's medical texts like a sponge, learning about local ailments and herbal remedies. He never breached the topic of Grisha's locked basement, but he could feel a palpable weight connected to it, a secret that mirrored the sadness in the man's eyes. Grisha saw something in Izuku, a fierce intellect and a profound sense of justice that resonated with something deep within himself. But his most important role, the one that unknowingly anchored him to this new world, was that of an older brother to the trio. At 16, he was a bridge between their childhood and the harsh reality of their world. Armin, with his insatiable curiosity, was his most devoted student. Deku would listen for hours as Armin spoke of the outside world, of the salt oceans and fields of fire water he'd read about. Unlike the other adults who dismissed it as fantasy, Deku validated his dreams. "It's all real, Armin," he'd say, a nostalgic ache in his voice. "The ocean is so big it makes you feel like an ant, and the salt spray on your face feels like freedom. He would teach Armin concepts from his world, basic physics, strategic principles from old war movies, problem-solving techniques. Armin's mind was a brilliant, fertile ground, and Deku nurtured it, seeing in the boy a strategist who could one day save countless lives. Eren was a different challenge. He was a tempest of raw emotion, his anger and his desire for freedom constantly at war with the world around him. He was often getting into fights with local bullies who mocked his dreams. One afternoon, Deku found him squaring off against 3 larger boys, his fists clenched, his face a mask of defiance. Deku didn't intervene with force. He simply walked up, put a calming hand on Eren's shoulder, and used logic. He calmly and systematically pointed out the strategic disadvantages of Eren's position, the numerical superiority of his opponents, and the statistical likelihood of him receiving more injuries than he could inflict. The bullies, confused by this strange analytical approach to a fistfight, lost their momentum and eventually wandered off, grumbling. "You should have let me fight them." Eren fumed afterward. "A hero doesn't fight because he can, Eren," Deku said softly, looking him in the eye. "He fights because he must. And he chooses his battles. Your anger is a tool, not a master. Let it be the fire in the forge, not the wildfire that burns down the forest." He began to spar with Eren, not just teaching him punches and kicks, but the discipline behind them, footwork, balance, and most importantly, control. With Mikasa, it was a silent understanding. She was a quiet shadow, her entire world revolving around Eren's safety. She watched Deku with wary, observant eyes. She saw how he guided Eren, how he protected Armin, how he never rose to anger. He wasn't a threat. In time, a quiet respect formed. He would sometimes find a freshly picked apple left for him at the table, or a tear in his plain-spun shirt mended with meticulous stitches. It was her way of acknowledging him as an ally in her singular, unwavering mission to protect Eren. And so, the year passed. The sharp edges of Izuku's despair were worn smooth by routine and responsibility. He was still lost, but he was no longer adrift. He had found a fragile, temporary peace. It was a beautiful day. The sun was warm, the sky a vast, placid blue. The market in Shiganshina was alive with the familiar symphony of commerce, merchants hawking their wares, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the laughter of children chasing each other through the packed square. Deku walked alongside Eren and Armin, a small, genuine smile on his face. He had just finished helping Grisha organize his medical supplies, and Carla had sent them out to buy vegetables for dinner. Eren was, as usual, complaining. "I don't see why we have to do this," he grumbled, kicking a loose stone. "This is boring. We should be training." "It's helping your mom, Eren," Deku said patiently. "That's important work, too. Besides," he added, ruffling Armin's hair, "Armin was going to show us that new chart he made of the river currents." Armin's face lit up. "It's fascinating. I think I've figured out why the sediment builds up on the eastern bank. It has to do with the Coriolis." He was cut off by a sudden, violent tremor. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a single, massive jolt, as if the world itself had been punched. The chatter in the market died instantly. A collective gasp was followed by an eerie, unnatural silence. Everyone, as if pulled by a single string, looked up. They looked at the wall. Deku's eyes followed theirs. His blood ran cold. A peal of what sounded like thunder, but wasn't, cracked the sky. A bolt of golden lightning, impossibly bright, struck the top of Wall Maria, right above the main gate. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was focused, deliberate, and pregnant with dreadful purpose. Then, from the cloud of smoke and steam, a hand appeared. It was colossal, skinless, composed of exposed red muscle and sinew. Its fingers, larger than houses, curled over the 50-meter-high precipice of the wall. A wave of collective terror, a physical, palpable thing, washed over the crowd. People began to scream. Slowly, a head rose above the wall. It had no skin, its face a grotesque death mask of exposed teeth and glowing, intelligent eyes that looked down upon the city not with hunger, but with a cold, calculating appraisal. It was a god of destruction, peering over the edge of its creation before smashing it to pieces. Deku's mind, his hero's soul, shrieked. "Villain!" A villain on a scale I've never imagined. I have to fight. I have to stop it. He reached for one for all, a desperate, futile prayer to a silent God. Nothing. The embers in his soul didn't even flicker. He was powerless. The sheer, overwhelming scale of the threat, combined with his own gut-wrenching impotence, was a physical blow. He felt like he was going to be sick. The colossal titan, as it would come to be known, drew back its leg. Time seemed to slow down. Deku saw it all with horrifying clarity, the straining tendons, the incredible power coiling in its limb. He knew what was coming. Run! He screamed, his voice raw with terror. Get away from the gate. He grabbed Eren and Armin, yanking them back with all his might just as the Titan's foot connected with the outer gate of Shiganshina. The sound was the end of the world. A cataclysmic explosion of stone and force tore through the city. The gate, humanity's shield for a century, shattered like porcelain. A hurricane of wind and shrapnel erupted from the point of impact. Boulders the size of carts were launched into the air, arcing over the city like horrifying meteors. Deku's hero instincts, honed by countless battles, took over. He couldn't fight the god, but he could save the ants. He shoved Eren and Armin behind the solid stone corner of the bakery. Stay here! Don't move! He turned back to the chaos. The air was thick with dust and screams. A massive chunk of the gate was hurtling towards a group of people frozen in terror. He didn't think. He acted. He ran faster than any normal human had a right to. His legs, conditioned by a year of relentless training on top of his Yui regimen, pumped like pistons. He was a green and brown blur, weaving through the panicking crowd. He reached the group, a mother and her two small children, and threw his body into them, tackling them to the ground behind a sturdy-looking water trough just as the boulder smashed into the spot where they had been standing, pulverizing it into dust. He was up in an instant. His mind was a frantic cacophony. Analyze. Prioritize. Save. A merchant's stall had collapsed, trapping a man's leg. He sprinted over, adrenaline surging through him. He gripped the heavy wooden beam. It was heavy, impossibly so. For a horrifying second, he thought he wouldn't be able to lift it. He gritted his teeth, let out a guttural roar, and put every ounce of his trained, quirkless strength into the effort. The muscles in his back and arms screamed, but the beam lifted, just enough for the man to pull his mangled leg free. Go! Get to the inner gate! Deku yelled, not waiting for a thank you. He scanned the square, his eyes darting everywhere. But for every person he could help, there were 100 more he couldn't. The scene was one of pure, unadulterated carnage. Strange, loping shapes were beginning to enter through the breached gate. 3 meter. 7 meter. 15 meter. Titans. They were inside. He saw one, a pot-bellied 5-meter class, scoop up a screaming woman and bite her in half with a sickening crunch. The sight was so monstrous, so fundamentally wrong, it bypassed his brain and struck him directly in the soul. This wasn't a battle. This was a feeding frenzy. His head snapped back towards the bakery. Eren and Armin were gone. Eren! He screamed, his voice cracking with panic. Then he saw them. 2 small figures, running against the tide of fleeing citizens. They were running towards the destruction. Towards the residential area. Towards their home. No, Deku breathed, his heart seizing in his chest. He knew where their house was. It was right in the path of the debris field. No, 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 no! He took off after them, his earlier sprint seeming leisurely by comparison. He pushed his body past its limits, his lungs burning, his legs aching. The city was a labyrinth of death. He dodged a grasping hand from a 4-meter titan, the wind from its movement rustling his hair. He vaulted over the crushed remains of a cart, the smell of blood thick and coppery in the air. The sounds were a nightmare symphony, the wet tearing of flesh, the panic neighing of horses, the endless, piercing screams of the dying. He finally caught up to them as they rounded the final corner. He saw what they saw. Their house was destroyed. A massive boulder, a jagged piece of wall Maria, had crashed directly through the roof, crushing the structure, and under the central beam of the collapsed house, pinned from the waist down, was Carla Jaeger. She was alive. Her eyes were wide with pain and terror, but they lit up with a desperate hope when she saw them. Eren! Mikasa! Mom! Eren screamed, scrambling over the debris. Mikasa was right behind him, her face a pale, emotionless mask that barely concealed the frantic terror in her eyes. Deku's mind went into overdrive. The sludge villain. Bakugo. He had stood there, frozen, useless. He had sworn to never let that happen again. This was the same. A person trapped. A life on the line. Carla! He yelled, skidding to a halt beside Eren. Don't worry, we'll get you out. Izuku, you have to take the children and run, she gasped, her voice strained. A Titan is coming. Deku looked up. She was right. Down the street, a Titan was approaching. It was tall, maybe 15 meters, with long, stringy blonde hair and a horrifyingly wide, fixed smile that seemed to stretch from ear to ear. Its eyes were vacant, but its grin felt personal, malicious. It was the stuff of nightmares. There's no time for that. Deku snarled, a ferocity he hadn't felt in a year surging through him. Eren, Mikasa, on my count, we lift. Grab the beam. We can do this. This was his moment of redemption. He was strong. His body was a weapon. He could save her. He had to. He positioned himself, getting the best leverage he could. He saw the grim determination on Mikasa's face, the desperate fury on Eren's. 3, 2, 1. Lift. They heaved, their combined strength straining against the immense weight. The beam groaned. It lifted, a fraction of an inch, the dust and splinters raining down on them. Deku's hands, uncalloused by the manual labor of this world, were immediately torn open by the rough, splintered wood, blood welling up. Again! He roared. They tried again, putting every fiber of their being into it. The beam shifted, but it didn't rise. Carla let out a pained cry as the movement crushed her legs further. It was too heavy. Even with his advanced physique, even with Mikasa's own prodigious strength, it was too much. The smiling Titan was getting closer. Its heavy footfalls were like a death knell. Thump. 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 Izuku, please. Carla begged, tears streaming down her face. My legs are crushed. Even if you get me out, I can't run. Please, just take the children and go. You have to live. No! Eren screamed, his voice cracking. I'll carry you. We're getting you out of here. Deku looked from Carla's pleading face to the approaching monster, and then down at his bloody, useless hands. Failure. The bitter, acidic taste of it filled his mouth. He was failing. He was strong, but not strong enough. If he had one for all, if he had just 1%, he could have tossed this beam aside like a twig. But he didn't. He was just Izuku Midoriya, a boy with strong muscles and a hero's heart, and it wasn't enough. The memory of All Might's words echoed in his head. Meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. He was meddling. And he was failing. Suddenly, a figure landed beside them with the hiss of gas. It was Hannes, the perpetually tipsy garrison soldier, but his face was pale and sober with terror. Hannes! Help us! Eren yelled. It's heavy, but with you, we can do it. Hannes drew his blades, his eyes fixed on the smiling Titan. I'll kill it. I'll repay my debt to Dr. Jaeger right here. He charged forward, but after a few steps he froze. He looked up at the sheer, terrifying scale of the Titan, at its inhuman grin, and the courage drained from his face, replaced by a primal, instinctual fear. Deku saw it happen. The soldier was gone, and only a terrified man remained. Hannes turned, ran back, and sheathed his blades. In one swift motion, he hooked an arm around Eren's torso and threw Mikasa over his other shoulder. What are you doing? Eren shrieked, struggling against his grip. We have to save my mom. Izuku, grab him! Carla screamed, her voice a desperate command. Deku was frozen for a split second, his mind at war with his soul. To run was to abandon her. To stay was to die with her. His hero's spirit screamed stay. Fight. Die for what's right. But Carla's plea, the logic of the situation, the absolute certainty of their deaths. Hannes made the choice for him. Boy, grab my arm. Now. Deku looked at Carla one last time. Her face was a mask of tearful gratitude and heartbreaking love. "Thank you," she mouthed to him. Then her eyes fixed on her children. "Eren! Mikasa! Survive!" Something in Deku broke. He grabbed onto Hannes' arm, his legs moving on autopilot as Hannes ran, carrying the three of them away from the wreckage. Deku looked back over his shoulder, his heart shattering into a million pieces. He watched as the smiling Titan reached the house. He watched as it bent down, its grin never faltering. He watched as its massive hand ignored the rubble and closed around Carla's torso. He saw the look of agony and terror on her face. He heard her scream. He watched as the Titan lifted her to its mouth. He saw the spray of blood. He heard the sickening, final crunch of bone, and he heard Eren scream. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a sound of pure, undiluted agony and hatred, a sound that ripped itself from the boy's very soul. It was the sound of a childhood ending, of a heart being irrevocably broken and reforged into something terrible and new. That sound, and the image of Carla's death, burned themselves into Izuku Midoriya's memory. It was the sludge villain incident magnified 1,000 times. He hadn't just failed to save someone, he had been forced to participate in abandoning them. He had run away. And a piece of him died in that moment, right alongside Carla Yeager. The evacuation boat was a vessel of silent misery. It was packed to the brim with the survivors of Shiganshina, a collection of broken, traumatized people adrift on a river of despair. The air was thick with the sounds of quiet sobbing and the hollow-eyed silence of those who had no tears left to cry. Deku moved through the crowd on autopilot. His hands were wrapped in makeshift bandages, but the pain was a distant echo compared to the gaping wound in his soul. He used the basic medical knowledge he'd learned from Grisha to tend to the wounded, cleaning cuts, bandaging gashes, and offering words of comfort that felt like ash in his mouth. It was a compulsion. He had to be useful. He had to do something. He found Eren, Mikasa, and Armin huddled near the railing. Mikasa was staring into nothingness, her expression blank, her knuckles white where she gripped her own arms. Eren was vibrating with a silent, terrifying rage, tears of fury carving clean tracks through the grime on his face. Armin was sobbing, his body shaking with uncontrolled grief for the world they had just lost. Deku knelt beside them, but no words came. What could he say? "I'm sorry? It'll be okay?" They were hollow lies. He had failed them. He had failed their mother. He put a hand on Eren's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity in their shared trauma. Eren didn't seem to notice. His burning, teal-green eyes were fixed on the shore, on the burning remains of their home. Then, a second cataclysmic boom echoed across the water. All heads turned. Far in the distance, at Wall Maria's inner gate, another impossible sight unfolded. A massive, bull-like titan, its body covered in what looked like thick, bony armor, appeared as if from nowhere. It lowered its head and charged. It hit the inner gate like a living battering ram, its speed utterly unnatural. The gate exploded inward, and with it, the last bastion of hope. Wall Maria had fallen. Deku's analytical mind, a stubborn flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness, kicked in despite his grief. Two of them. The colossal and now this armored titan. Both appeared with a flash of lightning. Both targeted the gates. This wasn't a random attack. This was a coordinated, intelligent assault. They aren't just monsters. They're soldiers. He filed the information away, a cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach. This was worse than he could have imagined. The sight of the second breach seemed to be the final straw for Eren. His trembling stopped. A chilling stillness came over him. He stood up, his small fists clenched so tight they were white. "I'm going to kill them," he whispered, his voice dangerously low, a growl that promised death. He raised his voice, a raw, broken shout that carried across the deck, silencing the weeping. "I'm going to wipe them from the face of this world. Every last one." It was a vow of absolute vengeance, born from the deepest well of pain and hatred. It was a promise of extermination. Deku looked at Eren's face, at the pure, unadulterated fury that had consumed the boy he knew, and he felt a profound sorrow. He understood the rage. He felt it himself. The desire to make them pay for what they did was a burning coal in his own chest. But then his gaze drifted. He looked at the crying child clinging to her mother's leg. He looked at the old man staring blankly at his trembling, empty hands. He looked at Armin, who was not filled with hate, but with devastating, paralyzing fear. He looked at Mikasa, lost in her own silent world of grief. And he knew Eren's vow was not enough. To simply kill, to become a monster to fight monsters, would not heal this broken world. It wouldn't bring back the dead. It wouldn't mend the shattered hearts of the living. In that moment, standing on a floating tomb surrounded by the ghosts of a fallen city, Izuku Midoriya made a different vow. He looked not at the distant, burning horizon, but at the faces of the people around him. He felt their collective pain as if it were his own failure, his powerlessness, the sight of Carla's death. It all coalesced into a single, unshakable point of resolve. I won't just kill them, he swore to himself, a silent promise that resonated deeper than any shout. His voice was a whisper in the core of his being, a hero's creed reforged in the fires of hell. I will save you. I will protect you. I will be the shield this world needs, even if I have no power. I will stand between you and the darkness, and I will not let you be devoured. I will save everyone I can. It was not a vow of vengeance. It was a vow of salvation. His path, which had been foggy and uncertain for a year, was now illuminated with blinding, terrible clarity. The garrison protected the peace within the walls. The military police grew corrupt in the safety of the interior. But the Survey Corps, they fought back. They rode into the darkness, seeking knowledge, seeking a future, seeking freedom. They were the ones who faced the horror head-on. To fulfill his vow, to become the hero this world needed, there was only one place he could go. He looked at Eren, whose face was set in a mask of grim determination. He looked at Mikasa, who would follow Eren to the ends of the earth. He looked at Armin, who would find the courage to follow his friends. Their path was now his. His decision was made. Not with hope, not with excitement, but with the cold, hard certainty of a man walking to his own execution for a cause greater than himself. He would join the Survey Corps. And he would become this world's unwavering heart, or die trying. 2 years. 2 years of gnawing grief and simmering resolve. 2 years since the sky fell and the world of Izuku Midoriya shrank to the confines of humanity's final, desperate cage. The fall of Wall Maria was not just a historical event for him. It was a personal soundtrack of screaming, the image of a grotesque smile, and the phantom weight of a vow made on a boat of ghosts. The 104th Training Corps was a brutal, mud-caked, sweat-soaked crucible designed to forge children into weapons. It was a place where hope went to die, replaced by the grim necessity of survival. The head instructor, Keith Shotties, was a force of nature, a man whose voice could peel paint from walls and whose glare could curdle milk. He saw them not as individuals, but as raw material, cattle to be sorted into fodder for the front lines, comfortable police for the interior, or glorified maintenance workers for the garrison. In this churning mass of traumatized youth, Izuku Midoriya was an anomaly. A puzzle Shotties couldn't solve. He was 17 now, his frame filled out by 2 years of relentless, obsessive training layered on top of the already formidable physique Yue had given him. He was no longer the somewhat lanky boy who had landed in this world. He was broad-shouldered, his body a tightly coiled collection of dense muscle, covered in a latticework of faint, silvery scars from a power he could no longer access. This physicality was the first part of the puzzle. During the grueling 10-kilometer runs that started each day, only one cadet could keep pace with him, Mikasa Ackerman. But their efforts were worlds apart. Mikasa moved with an unnatural, predatory grace, her breathing even, her expression placid. She was a natural wonder, a force of biology that defied conventional explanation. Izuku, running beside her, was a portrait of pure, unadulterated effort. His teeth were gritted, sweat beaded on his brow and plastered his unruly green hair to his forehead, and his breathing was a controlled, powerful rhythm of intake and exhalation. He was not gifted, he was driven. The other cadets saw it, and it baffled them. They could dismiss Mikasa as a prodigy, but Izuku was something else. He was a testament to the absolute limit of what a normal human body could achieve through sheer, terrifying willpower. The second part of the puzzle was his mind. In the classroom, where Shotties lectured on Titan weaknesses, troop formations, and supply line logistics, Izuku was in his element. The other cadets would doze off, pass notes, or stare blankly at the complex diagrams. Eren would burn with a fierce but unfocused intensity. Jean would preen and talk about joining the MP, and Sasha would dream of her next meal. Armin would listen intently, absorbing the information with a quiet, academic thirst. But Izuku interrogated it. Cadet Midoriya! Shadi's voice cracked like a whip in the stuffy lecture hall one afternoon. You've been scribbling in that ridiculous book of yours for the past hour instead of listening. Perhaps you can enlighten the class. Given a 10-meter and a 7-meter abnormal closing on a supply wagon with a standard 4-person escort in an open field, what is the priority? Jean Kirstein snorted. Easy. The escort splits. 2 take the 10-meter, 2 take the 7-meter. Go for the nape, get it done quick. It was the textbook answer. A bold and foolish plan, Kirstein, that would likely get your entire squad killed. Shadi's growled. Midoriya. Your answer. Izuku stood, his posture ramrod straight. He hadn't even looked up from his notebook. The priority isn't the Titans, sir. It's the cargo. The objective is to protect the supplies, not to achieve kills. A murmur went through the classroom. Shadi's single eyebrow rose a fraction of an inch. Explain. The standard textbook engagement protocol is flawed because it assumes a successful outcome. Izuku began, his voice calm and clear, a stark contrast to the usual nervous mumble of his younger self. 2 years in this world had burned that away. In an open field, ODM gear is at its least effective. There are no anchor points. Engaging in prolonged aerial combat is a death sentence. Splitting the team halves their strength and doubles the risk. The correct response is a calculated disengagement. He finally looked up, his green eyes sharp and analytical. 2 members of the escort use their gas and smoke signals to create a diversion, drawing the Titans' attention to one flank. They don't engage to kill, they engage to distract, using hit-and-run tactics to keep the Titans focused. The other 2 escort members stay with the wagon, using the diversion to increase their distance. Once the wagon is at a safe range, the decoy team disengages and retreats. We sacrifice a small amount of gas and a few minutes of time, but the escort remains intact, and most importantly, the supplies reach their destination. The goal is mission success, not kill counts. The hall was silent. Even Eren, who usually scoffed at anything that didn't involve charging headfirst into a fight, looked thoughtful. Armin was staring at Izuku with undisguised awe. Shadi stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Your analysis assumes the abnormals will fall for a simple diversion. It assumes they have recognizable patterns, sir. Izuku countered respectfully. Based on all available reports, even abnormals prioritize the largest or most dynamic concentration of targets. A 4-person escort is a cluster. 2 riders creating a commotion on an open flank becomes a more tempting, isolated target. It's a calculated risk, but it's a strategy based on manipulating the enemy's predictable behavior, rather than gambling on a perfect, high-risk attack. Shadi said nothing. He just stared, his face a mask of stone. Sit down, Midoriya. He didn't say the answer was correct. He didn't have to. The fact that he didn't call Izuku an idiot was the highest praise Keith Shadi's could offer. From that day on, the other cadets started calling him the professor. It was part jest, part genuine respect. The boy who trained like a beast thought like a commander. He didn't fit. The hand-to-hand combat training was Shadi's favorite form of torture. Your precious gear will fail, he would roar, pacing between pairs of sparring cadets. You'll run out of gas. Your blades will break, and when that happens, you'll be on the ground, alone. Your only weapon will be your own body. And if you don't know how to use it, you are nothing but Titan food. Izuku excelled here, but it was a different kind of excellence. He didn't have Annie Leonhardt's fluid, deadly grace, or Mikasa's overwhelming strength. He fought like a hero from his old world, a blend of disciplined boxing, kickboxing, and grappling fundamentals, all centered around predicting his opponent's moves and exploiting openings. Today, Shadi's was in a particularly foul mood. You're all pathetic. Jaeger, you fight with nothing but rage. Arlert, you fight like you're afraid to break a nail. Ackerman, stop holding back. And you, Blouse, Stop trying to take a bite out of your sparring partner. His eyes landed on Izuku, who had just cleanly disarmed Connie. Midoriya! You think you're good? Let's see how you handle real power. Brawn! Get over here. You two are paired. A ripple of anticipation went through the cadets. Reiner Braun was a monolith. He was tall, built like a fortress, and possessed a core of strength and stability that made him a natural leader. When he sparred, it was like watching a bear wrestle. Pitting him against Izuku was a clash of titans. Reiner gave Izuku a friendly, confident grin. Don't hold back, Professor. I want to see what you've really got. You too, Reiner, Izuku replied, settling into his fighting stance. The spar began. It was a classic battle of technique versus brute force. Izuku was faster, more agile. He weaved and dodged, landing quick, precise strikes to Reiner's side and shoulders, trying to score points. But it was like punching a stone wall. Reiner would absorb the blows with a grunt, his sheer mass and density negating much of the impact. Reiner's strategy was simple: get his hands on Izuku. He pressed forward, relentlessly, his powerful swings forcing Izuku onto the defensive. Izuku dodged a haymaker that would have knocked a normal person out, the wind from the punch rustling his hair. He ducked under a grapple, trying to get to Reiner's back, but Reiner was deceptively quick. He spun, catching Izuku's arm. Izuku's eyes widened. Reiner's grip was like a steel vice. He tried to twist out of it, using a technique Aizawa-sensei had taught him, but Reiner's strength was abnormal. It was beyond that of a well-trained cadet. It felt like something more. With a powerful heave, Reiner pulled Izuku off balance and slammed him onto the muddy ground. Before Izuku could recover, Reiner was on top of him, his massive weight pinning him down, one forearm pressing hard against Izuku's throat. Izuku struggled, his legs scrabbling for purchase in the mud. He couldn't breathe. The pressure was immense. Panic, cold and familiar, began to prickle at the edges of his consciousness. Pinned. Helpless. The image of the sludge villain's slimy form closing around him flashed in his mind. Too heavy. Can't lift it. The memory of Carla Jaeger, crushed beneath the beam, her eyes pleading. Useless. Powerless. The feeling was identical. That soul-crushing impotence, the desperate need to do something when your body refused to obey. He was trapped. Again. He was going to fail. Again. Give up, Midoriya? Reiner grunted, applying more pressure. He wasn't being malicious. It was just a competition. But for Izuku, it was a trigger. No! A primal scream erupted in the depths of his mind. Not again! He pushed back against Reiner's arm with everything he had. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a desperate, instinctual rejection of his own powerlessness. He felt that familiar, hollow place in his soul where one for all used to be. And for the first time in 2 years, something answered his desperation. It wasn't a flood. It wasn't even a trickle. It was a single, defiant spark jumping a dead synapse. A flicker of emerald lightning, no bigger than a firefly, erupted from the skin of his forearm. It made no sound, but it carried a jolt of pure kinetic energy. The effect was instantaneous. Reiner, who had been leaning his full weight on Izuku, was suddenly thrown back as if by a powerful static shock. He stumbled, his grip broken, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. He landed on his rear in the mud, staring at Izuku. What the hell was that? He demanded, shaking his hand. It felt like I was struck by lightning. Izuku gasped for air, clutching his own arm. A familiar dull ache was spreading from his wrist to his elbow. It wasn't the bone-shattering agony of a 100% smash, but the deep, resonant throb of a circuit being used after years of dormancy. It was the most welcome pain he had ever felt. He looked up, his mind racing to find an explanation. He saw the suspicious look on Shadi's face. He saw Bertolt Hoover rush to Reiner's side, his eyes wide and fixed on Izuku. He saw Annie, a few yards away, pause her own spar, her calculating gaze missing nothing. I don't know, Izuku stammered, forcing a look of confusion onto his face. He rubbed his arm. Just a muscle spasm, I guess. Must have hit a nerve when you had me pinned. Shadi stared him down, his eyes narrowed. A muscle spasm that threw a man twice your weight off of you. Don't take me for a fool, Midoriya. Maybe it was static electricity from the ground? Connie suggested helpfully from the sidelines, ever the simpleton. Happens to me sometimes with my wool blanket. Shadi shot Connie a glare that could kill small animals. He looked back at Izuku, then at Reiner, who was still looking at his hand in disbelief. The moment was broken. The mystery was there, but it was unsubstantiated, bizarre. Shadi's hated things he couldn't explain. Get up, Braun, he barked. The spar is over. Midoriya wins. Next pair! As Izuku walked to the sidelines, his heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror and elation. It's there, he thought, his hand trembling as he flexed his fingers. It's not gone, it's sleeping. And I just woke it up. He met Armin's concerned gaze. Are you okay, Izuku? Your arm looks like it's hurting. I'm fine, Izuku said, forcing a smile. Just pulled something. But as he watched the rest of the training, his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't just an analyst anymore. He wasn't just a physical specimen. He was the keeper of a sleeping giant, and he had to learn how to control it, in secret, before it tore him apart. That night, long after the last candle in the barracks had been extinguished, and the snores of his fellow cadets filled the air, Izuku slipped out of his bunk. He moved with a practiced silence, his bare feet making no sound on the cold wooden floor. He grabbed his boots and crept out into the chilly night air. He found a secluded spot in the woods, far from the main training grounds, a small clearing lit by the pale light of a slivered moon. He was alone. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the wind. He stood in the center of the clearing and took a deep breath. Okay. Focus. He tried to replicate the feeling from the spar. The desperation. The feeling of being pinned, helpless. He closed his eyes, picturing Carla's death, the smiling Titan's grin, his own failure. The grief and rage were still there, a toxic cocktail simmering just below the surface. He channeled it, pushing it, trying to force a reaction. He held out his arm and focused, trying to will the power into existence. Nothing. He tried again, gritting his teeth, his muscles tensing. Still nothing. The connection was gone again, the line dead. Frustration mounted. Was it a one-time fluke? An accident? He slammed his fist into a nearby tree, the impact sending a jolt of pain up his arm, but it was just normal, physical pain. There was no spark. He sank to his knees, his head in his hands. It was worse now. For 2 years, he had accepted his powerlessness. But today, he had been given a glimpse of what he'd lost, a taste of the power he so desperately needed. To have it dangled in front of him only to be snatched away again was a unique form of torture. Think, Izuku, think. How did All Might explain it? He thought back to those early lessons, the ones that felt like a lifetime ago. It's like an egg in a microwave. Clench your butt cheeks and yell smash from the bottom of your heart. The advice seemed so simplistic, so foolishly heroic in this grim, gray world. But there was a core truth to it. It wasn't about anger. All Might's power was tied to his will to save, his role as a symbol. Deku's power had sparked not just from desperation, but from the desperate rejection of his own failure to save. It was tied to his vow. He stood up again, his approach different this time. He didn't focus on anger or fear. He focused on the faces on the evacuation boat. He pictured Armin's terrified eyes, Mikasa's vacant stare, Aaron's burning hatred. He pictured the mother and children he'd tackled out of the way of the boulder. He remembered the feeling of lifting the beam off the trapped merchant. I will save them. It was not a thought, it was a mantra. I will be their shield. He held out his hand, palm up. He stopped trying to force the power. Instead, he tried to welcome it. He reached for that distant, dying ember in his soul, not with a demand, but with an invitation. He pictured the power not as a weapon, but as an energy, flowing from the core of his being, down his shoulder, into his arm, spreading through his veins like lifeblood. And then he saw it. A tiny, faint green line of light traced itself across the back of his hand, like a bioluminescent vein. It was weak, fragile, but it was there. His breath hitched. He focused harder, feeding it with his resolve. The line brightened, and a soft, emerald glow, no bigger than his thumbnail, materialized in his palm. It pulsed with a gentle, silent energy. It felt warm. It felt like coming home. Tears welled in his eyes. He laughed, a quiet, breathless sound of pure relief. It wasn't gone. It was just waiting. He had to rebuild the connection from scratch. He had to resynchronize his soul with the power of the vestiges. He held the faint glow for a few seconds before it guttered and died, leaving his arm with that familiar dull ache. It was a start. It was more than a start. It was everything. It was hope. A month later, Shotties announced the final major team exercise before graduation, a full-day navigation and combat simulation in the vast forest south of the training grounds. The objective is simple, Shotties barked, standing before the assembled 104th. Your squads will be given a map with a starting point and an end point. You are to navigate the terrain and reach the destination before sundown. However, his lips curled into a sadistic smirk. The instructors and I will be in the forest. We will be acting as titans. If we see you, we will hunt you. If we catch you, your entire squad fails. You are permitted to engage us using the wooden blades and training dummies on your backs. A clean strike to the nape cutout counts as a kill. But I advise against it. We know this forest better than you know your own mothers. Your best chance is to not be seen at all. Squad leaders step forward. Izuku found himself assigned to a squad with Armin, Jean, and Connie. It was a volatile mix. Armin was the brains, Connie was the comic relief, and Jean was the pragmatic, cynical foil to Aaron's idealism. Jean had been appointed squad leader, a fact he was all too proud of. All right, listen up, Jean said, puffing his chest out as they gathered at their starting point. I'm the leader. We stick together, move fast, and if we see an instructor, we take them down. 4-on-1, they don't stand a chance. We'll get the highest score. Is that wise, Jean? Armin asked timidly. Instructor Shotty said it's best not to be seen. Engaging seems risky. Risky is showing them we're scared, alert. Jean shot back. We show them we're ready for the field. What do you think, Professor? He asked, turning to Izuku with a challenging look. Izuku was studying the map, his brow furrowed. He was also making notes in his small, worn notebook, Cadet Training Instructor Patterns, Volume 3. Armin is right, Jean. Engaging is what they expect. It's a trap. A trap? It's a combat exercise. Jean scoffed. Exactly, Izuku said, looking up. And Shotty's designed it. He's not testing our ability to fight. He's testing our ability to think under pressure and make smart, strategic decisions. A head-on fight is the dumbest decision we could make. So we just run and hide? Connie asked, scratching his head. No, Izuku said, a glint in his eye. We outthink them. He pointed to the map. The path they've given us is the most direct route, but it goes through a series of clearings and predictable choke points. That's where they'll set their ambushes. They're hurting us. He then pulled out another, hand-drawn map from his notebook. It was a topological map of the forest, far more detailed than the one they were given, sketched from memory during countless training runs. They expect us to follow their path. So we won't, Izuku explained. We're going to take a longer, more difficult route through the densest part of the woods here. It's slower, but the tree cover is thickest. They'll have low visibility. And based on my observations of the instructors' patrol habits during perimeter drills, they avoid this sector because the terrain is treacherous and it's a poor vantage point. They'll be concentrating their forces on the main paths, where they can spot multiple teams at once. We're going where they aren't looking. Jean stared at Izuku's map, then back at the official one. He was prideful, but he wasn't an idiot. Izuku's logic was sound, his preparation unnervingly thorough. You drew that from memory? Connie asked, amazed. It makes sense. Armin breathed, his eyes wide. It's a classic flanking maneuver, but applied to stealth instead of combat. Jean hesitated, his pride warring with his common sense. Finally, he let out a frustrated sigh. Fine. We'll try it your way, Professor. But if we get lost and eaten by a real bear, it's on you. They set off, plunging into the thick, untamed part of the forest. The going was slow. They had to navigate thick undergrowth and climb over moss-covered, fallen logs. An hour in, Connie was complaining, and Jean was beginning to second-guess the decision. Then they heard it. In the distance, from the direction of the main path, came a series of triumphant shouts and the frustrated cries of a squad that had just been caught. They all froze, looking at Izuku. That was Marco's squad, Jean said, his eyes wide. They walked right into it. A newfound respect settled over the group. Izuku's plan was working. They continued on in silence, their trust in him solidifying with every step. He led them with a quiet confidence, pointing out optimal paths, identifying landmarks only he seemed to recognize, and keeping them moving at a steady, silent pace. They were about halfway to their destination when Izuku suddenly held up a hand, signaling them to stop. He pressed himself against a large oak tree, peering through the leaves. "What is it?" Jean whispered, moving up beside him. Izuku pointed. Through a small gap in the canopy, they could see a clearing below. And in that clearing was an instructor, perched on a branch, scanning the area. It was one of the ambushes Izuku had predicted, but there was something else. A second instructor was circling around the clearing's perimeter, effectively creating a pincer. "They're boxing in Thomas's team," Izuku murmured, his analytical mind kicking into high gear. He watched the instructor's movements, their lines of sight, their timing. "They're using a classic shepherding tactic. One acts as the visible threat, the wolf, forcing the sheep to flee in a specific direction, right into the path of the second, hidden wolf. We need to get out of here," Connie whispered, terrified. "No," Izuku said, his eyes gleaming with an idea. "This is an opportunity. Armin, you're the lightest. How's your gas discipline?" It's good," Armin stammered. "Okay. I need you to create a diversion. Not for them, but for Thomas's squad," Izuku explained in a low, rapid-fire whisper. "Fire a single smoke signal, far to the west. Make them think there's another squad over there. It'll break their focus and might give Thomas's team a chance to see the second trap. But they'll see the smoke. They'll come for us," Jean hissed. "Exactly," Izuku said. "The moment Armin fires, the three of us will move east, fast and low. The instructor in the tree will be focused on the smoke. The second one will likely move to investigate, clearing our path. We used their own strategy against them. It was risky. It was complicated. It was brilliant." Jean looked at Izuku, then at Armin, and nodded. "Do it." Armin, his hand trembling but his eyes determined, did as he was told. The pop hiss of the smoke gun was loud in the quiet woods. A plume of red smoke rose into the air far to their west. Down below, they saw the instructor in the tree jerk his head towards the smoke. The second instructor, just as Izuku predicted, broke off his flanking path to move towards the new disturbance. "Now!" Izuku commanded. The three of them moved, a blur of silent, coordinated motion. They scrambled through the undergrowth, using the noise and distraction to cover their retreat. When they finally stopped, hearts pounding, they were 100 meters away, completely undetected. They waited for Armin, who joined them a few minutes later, pale but exhilarated. They reached the designated endpoint just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. They were the first squad to arrive, and they hadn't been spotted once. Shades was there, standing by the finish marker, his arms crossed. His expression was thunderous. He looked them over, noting their clean uniforms and full complement of training blades. "Report, Kirstein," he commanded. Jean, for the first time, seemed at a loss for words. He looked at Izuku, who gave him a subtle nod. Jean cleared his throat. "Sir," Cadet Midoriya formulated a strategy of avoidance, utilizing an unconventional route to bypass predicted ambush points. "We encountered no hostiles and proceeded directly to the objective." Shadis's gaze shifted to Izuku, and it was heavy, intense, and searching. He was looking at the boy who bled for his squadmates in sparring, the boy whose tactical acumen was greater than his own, the boy who had appeared from nowhere with impossible knowledge and an unbreakable will. He was looking at an anomaly that threatened to break the very mold he used to create soldiers. He hated it. And he respected it more than anything he'd seen in years. "Dismissed," was all he said, turning his back on them. As they walked back towards the barracks, exhausted but victorious, Connie slung an arm around Izuku's shoulders. "Man, I'm never doubting you again, Professor!" He laughed. "That was amazing! You didn't just beat the test, you broke it!" Jean clapped him on the shoulder, a rare, genuine smile on his face. He's right. That was impressive, Midoriya. Izuku just smiled, a small, tired smile. It felt good. For the first time, he felt like he was truly making a difference, using his greatest weapon, his mind, to protect his friends. Later that night, as he lay in his bunk, he felt the familiar, dull ache in his arm. He had been practicing every night, coaxing the power out. He could now sustain a tiny, almost imperceptible 1% glow for nearly a minute. It was nothing. A parlor trick. It wouldn't kill a titan. It wouldn't even win him a fist fight. But as he looked around the dark barracks at the sleeping forms of his friends, his comrades, he knew it was the seed of something more. He had his mind. He had his body. And now, he had the faintest flicker of a god's power returning to him. He was the 104th's anomaly. And he was ready for the war to come. The graduation ceremony for the 104th Training Corps was not a celebration. It was a final muster, a grim accounting of the survivors before they were cast into the maw of the world. They stood in rigid formation in the pouring rain, the sky weeping a miserable, gray torrent that mirrored the mood. 3 years of hell had honed them, broken them, and reforged them into something resembling soldiers. Instructor Keith's shoddy stood before them, his face carved from granite, looking more imposing than ever against the stormy backdrop. His voice, a familiar gravelly roar, cut through the downpour. "You are no longer cadets!" he bellowed, his gaze sweeping over the sea of rain-slicked faces. "You are soldiers! For 3 years you have endured my abuse. You have survived our training, but the real test begins now. In the coming days you will choose your path. Will you grovel for a place in the military police, fat and safe in the interior? Will you be glorified janitors for the garrison, patching the walls you hide behind? Or will you offer up your hearts and join the Survey Corps, the wings of humanity that fly into the face of death itself?" He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Look at yourselves! You are soldiers. But you are not all equal. Most of you are cattle, fit only for the slaughter, but a select few among you are true weapons." The top 10 graduates of the 104th stepped forward. A ripple went through the ranks. 10 figures detached themselves from the formation, their movements sharp and precise. From 10th to 4th, Sasha Blouse, Connie Springer, Marco Bott, Jean Kirstein, Aaron Yeager, Annie Leonhardt, Bertold Hoover, Rainer Braun. Each name was a small victory, a testament to survival. Then Shadi's voice softened, just a fraction, a barely perceptible shift. "In second place, a prodigy of physical perfection, a warrior born to the battlefield, Mikasa Ackerman." All eyes went to the stoic, black-haired girl. Her face was a mask of indifference, but Izuku could see the subtle tension in her shoulders. Her fight was not for rank or glory, it was for Eren. Shadi's gaze then fell upon the final figure, the one who had stood silently at the head of the line. "And in first place, an anomaly." The word hung in the air, thick and heavy. "A soldier who thinks like a commander. A mind that sees the entire board when the rest of you see only the pieces before you. Izuku Midoriya." Izuku stood ramrod straight, his eyes fixed on Shadi's, the rain plastering his green hair to his scalp. He felt no pride, only the heavy weight of expectation. He had earned his rank not with a dormant quirk, but with his mind, his body, and the endless, obsessive scrawls in the notebooks he kept hidden under his bunk. That night, after the ceremony, the newly minted soldiers gathered in the mess hall. The mood was a strange cocktail of bravado, fear, and drunken celebration. Jean was holding court, loudly proclaiming his intention to join the military police and live a life of comfort in the interior. "Why would anyone choose to be Titan bait?" he declared, gesturing with a piece of bread. "The smart ones go where it's safe. Isn't that right, Marco?" Before anyone could answer, Eren Yeager slammed his fist on the table, silencing the chatter around him. His eyes burned with that familiar, furious fire. "You've all forgotten, haven't you?" he snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "You've forgotten the things you saw that day. The screams. The blood. We are not cattle to be kept safe. We are soldiers who are going to take back our world. I am joining the Survey Corps." The declaration was a stone dropped into a still pond. Jean scoffed, but others looked thoughtful, their drunken revelry soured by the reminder of their shared trauma. Are you insane, Eren? Jean shot back. You want to throw your life away? Better to die for freedom than live as a prisoner, Eren retorted. As the argument escalated, many looked to the other top graduates. Reiner and Bertolt were quiet, their expressions unreadable. Annie was aloof, seemingly uninterested. Mikasa's choice was obvious. She would follow Eren. Then, they looked at Izuku. He had been sitting quietly, nursing a cup of water, observing. He hadn't said a word. What about you, Professor? Connie asked, his voice softer now. You're the top of the class. You could write your own ticket to the military police. No one would blame you. Izuku slowly stood up. The area around him quieted. He didn't look at Jean or Eren. He looked around the room, at all the young, scared faces. He remembered his vow on the boat. I will save them. My choice was made a long time ago, he said, his voice calm and steady, devoid of Eren's fire but filled with an unshakable, bone-deep resolve. I'm joining the Survey Corps. It wasn't a fiery declaration. It was a statement of fact, as simple and certain as the sun rising, and coming from him, the analyst, the strategist, the one who always chose the smartest path. It carried a different kind of weight. If Izuku Midoriya, the man who outthought the instructors and broke every tactical test, believed the Survey Corps was the right choice, then it couldn't be simple suicide. It had to be a necessity. The effect was subtle but profound. Thomas Wagner, who had been wavering, nodded to himself. Mina Carolina exchanged a determined look with her friends. Sasha and Connie, who had been on the fence, looked at each other, their decision made. Izuku's quiet certainty had solidified the resolve of a dozen others far more effectively than Eren's rage ever could. 2 days later, they were atop Wall Rose, assigned to the Trost district. It was a day of mundane maintenance, cleaning the massive cannons that served as the wall's primary defense. The sun was bright, the mood almost peaceful. It was the calm before the storm. Eren was radiating a nervous energy, eager for a real fight. Can you believe it? 5 years, he said, staring out over the horizon. We're finally going to do it. We're going to retake Wall Maria. We'll see your ocean, Armin. Armin smiled, a fragile, hopeful expression. We will. Izuku stood beside them, his hand resting on the cool metal of a cannon. His senses were on high alert. He had been practicing with One for All in secret for 2 years. He could now sustain a stable 3% full cowling, a faint green aura that was almost invisible in the daylight. It didn't give him super strength, not in the way he was used to, but it supercharged his senses, his reflexes, and his speed, pushing his already peak human abilities into the low rungs of the superhuman. It came at a cost, a constant, gnawing ache in his bones and a rapid depletion of his stamina. It was a dangerous tool he had to use sparingly. He felt a faint tremor through the soles of his boots. It was almost imperceptible. Did you feel that? He asked, his voice low. Before they could answer, the sky cracked open. A bolt of golden lightning, identical to the one that had heralded the destruction of Shiganshina, struck the air just outside the wall. A colossal explosion of steam and energy billowed outwards. A cold, familiar dread washed over Izuku. It's happening again, he whispered. The face appeared. Skinless, skeletal, its massive, intelligent eyes peering over the 50-meter wall. The colossal titan. For a second, the world froze. Then chaos erupted. It's him! A soldier screamed. The colossal titan is here! The veterans were screaming orders, their faces pale with terror. The new graduates were frozen, their 3 years of training rendered meaningless by the sheer, godlike scale of the monster before them. But Eren was not frozen. He was incandescent with rage. It's been 5 years. I'm not the same person I was then. I'm a soldier now. He activated his ODM gear, launching himself off the wall directly at the Titan's face. Eren, no! Izuku yelled, his strategic mind screaming in protest. It's a feint. Its body is too hot. Your gear won't reach the nape from this angle. But Eren was beyond reason. He was a missile of pure vengeance. He soared towards the Titan, blades drawn, only to be met with a massive wave of superheated steam that blasted from the Titan's body. Eren was thrown back, his gear useless against the searing heat. The Titan drew back its massive foot and, with a terrifying, deliberate slowness, swung it towards the outer gate of Trost. The cannons Izuku and the others had just been cleaning were swatted aside like toys. The gate, humanity's shield, shattered under the impact, the sound a deafening cataclysm of splintering stone and shrieking metal. A hurricane of debris and wind blasted the top of the wall. Izuku, using his 3% boost for stability, anchored himself, grabbing Armin to keep him from being blown away. When the dust settled, the colossal Titan was gone, vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. But the damage was done. A gaping hole had been punched in Trost's defenses. The real battle was about to begin. All cadets to the ground! A commander's voice roared. Engage the Titans in the city! Elite squads, escort the civilians! Go, go, go! Izuku landed in the city streets with his squad, Armin, Mina Carolina, Thomas Wagner, and a few others. The scene was a horrifying echo of Shiganshina. Screams, chaos, and the loping, grotesque forms of Titans entering through the breach. But this time, Izuku was not a helpless observer. He was a soldier. And he was a leader. All right, listen up! He yelled, his voice cutting through the panic. We stick together! Our priority is supporting the evacuation teams. Mina, Thomas, you're on the flanks. Call out any targets coming from the side alleys. Armin, you're with me. I need your eyes. Look for patterns, identify the abnormals. We move as one. Understood? They all nodded, their fear momentarily suppressed by the certainty in his voice. They became a brutally efficient unit. Izuku, with his 3% full cowling, was a green-tinged blur. He was faster, stronger, and his mind processed the battlefield at an incredible speed. Mina, 7 meter on your left. It's a jumper, aim for its ankles first to ground it. He'd call out. He'd then zip in, his blades a flash of steel, carving a deep gash in the Titan's legs, setting up the kill for his teammate. Armin, what do you see? He yelled, landing on a rooftop beside the terrified but focused boy. T2 5 meters and a 3 meter are blocking the main evacuation route to the east. Armin reported, his voice shaking but his eyes sharp. The civilians are bottlenecked. Okay. New plan, Izuku said instantly. We're not strong enough to take 3 at once. We create a diversion. We'll lead them down this side street. It's narrow, it'll slow them down. We draw them away, the civilians get through. Go, they executed the plan perfectly. They were saving people. They were winning their small corner of the war. A dangerous sense of confidence began to build. Then they saw him. The Titan that had devoured Thomas Wagner's leg 5 years ago, the one that had set off Eren's suicidal charge. It was an abnormal, loping on all fours. And it was fast. Before their squad could even react, it leaped, not at them, but over them, its body a bizarre, soaring arc. It landed directly in the middle of a different squad. Eren's squad. Izuku watched in horror as it snatched Thomas Wagner from the air, his triumphant smile from moments before frozen on his face, and bit down. The crunch was sickeningly loud, and just like 5 years ago, something in Eren snapped. Eren, no! Izuku screamed across the rooftops, a desperate, futile plea. Stick to the plan! Don't let your rage. It was too late. Blind with fury, Eren charged, leading his squad in a reckless, vengeful assault. It was a massacre. One by one, Titans swarmed them. One cadet was snatched from the air. Another was slammed against a building. Then Izuku saw it. A Titan bit off Eren's leg. He tumbled from the sky, crashing onto a rooftop, unable to move. As his squad mates were devoured around him, he lay there, helpless. Armin landed near him, frozen in pure, catatonic terror. A large, bearded Titan reached for him, its vacant eyes fixed on the petrified boy. Eren, with his last ounce of strength, managed to grab Armin and throw him out of the way, his own body falling into the Titan's path. The Titan's jaws closed around him. From his vantage point 2 streets over, Izuku saw it all. Eren's desperate act. The Titan's jaws closing. The arm, severed at the shoulder, flying through the air. He felt the world tilt on its axis. Eren. Gone. The boy he had sparred with, argued with, guided. The fiery, indomitable heart of their group. Extinguished. The failure was a physical blow. It took his breath away. He had sworn to save them. And he had stood by, helpless, and watched one of his closest friends be eaten. The promise he made on the boat turned to ash in his mouth. He shook himself from his stupor. Armin. He had to get to Armin. He zipped across the rooftops, his movements frantic. He found Armin on his knees, staring into space, completely unresponsive. Armin! Armin, snap out of it! He yelled, shaking him. But Armin was gone, lost in the horror of what he had just witnessed. Izuku's gas hissed. Empty. He was stranded. He looked around. They were surrounded. Titans were closing in from all sides. He drew his blades, his knuckles white. He put himself between Armin and the encroaching monsters. One of them, the same bearded titan that had eaten Eren, turned its attention to them. It was slow, lumbering, but relentless. It reached the base of their building and began to climb. Izuku's mind raced. No gas. Broken blades. One catatonic squad mate. Surrounded. Unwinnable scenario. The titan's huge, grotesque face appeared over the edge of the roof. It loomed over them, its shadow a harbinger of death. Its massive hand, fingers as thick as tree trunks, reached for them. In that moment, Izuku wasn't entranced. He was back in Shiganshina. He saw the rubble, the crushed house. He saw Carla Jaeger, pinned and helpless. He heard her voice begging him to run, to save the children. He saw the smiling titan's hand close around her. He heard the crunch. He heard Eren's soul-tearing scream. The exact same scenario. A person he cared about frozen. A giant, monstrous hand reaching down. A choice between fighting a hopeless battle or accepting another failure. His entire being, every fiber of his soul, rebelled. The vow he made, forged in the fire of that failure, roared to life within him. Not again! The scream was not a word. It was a force of nature, a raw, primal rejection of reality itself. It was the collective shout of 8 previous heroes, channeled through the desperation of one boy who refused to fail again. He didn't think. He reacted. He reached for one for all, not with the careful, measured control of his nightly training, but with a desperate, all-or-nothing yank. The power answered. It wasn't the gentle 3% glow. It was a violent, explosive eruption. Cracks of brilliant green lightning, thick as his arm, exploded into existence, wrapping around his legs in a chaotic, beautiful storm. Full cowling 5%. The power surged through him, a wild, untamed river threatening to burst its banks. His muscles screamed, tearing under the sudden, immense strain. The bones in his legs groaned, threatening to turn to dust. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot nova of agony. But it was also power. The titan's hand was inches from grabbing Armin. Izuku didn't attack it. His vow wasn't to kill. It was to save. He moved. In one explosive burst of motion, he grabbed Armin, hauling him onto his back. He bent his knees, the green lightning concentrating in his legs, and he leaped. He didn't just jump to the next roof. He flew. He cleared the entire street, a 50-foot gap, in a single, impossible bound. He was a green comet, a thunderclap of motion, leaving a trail of displaced air in his wake. From a rooftop several streets away, Mikasa Ackerman, her world already shattered by the news of Eren's death, saw it. She had been sinking into a pit of despair, her will to fight draining away. Then she saw a flash of brilliant green, a streak of impossible speed that defied all laws of physics and reason. She saw Izuku, a boy she knew to be a normal, albeit highly trained, human, perform a miracle. The landing was not graceful. Izuku hit the opposite rooftop with the force of a car crash. The agony in his legs intensified 1,000-fold. He heard a sickening series of cracks as the bones in his shins fractured and his ligaments tore. The power of one for all vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving him in a world of pure, unadulterated pain. He collapsed in a heap, Armin tumbling safely beside him. He couldn't move. He couldn't even scream. He could only lie there, gasping, his legs a mangled, useless ruin. He had saved Armin. But he had crippled himself in the process. He lay there, helpless, listening to the sounds of the battle, the sounds of his friends dying. He had traded one moment of failure for another. It was then that a new sound joined the symphony of slaughter. A roar. Not the guttural, mindless roar of a normal titan, but a sharp, intelligent roar of pure rage. A 15-meter titan, lean and muscular with pointed ears and long dark hair, appeared from an alleyway. It moved with a purpose and speed that was utterly unnatural. It sprinted past a group of terrified garrison soldiers, ignoring them completely, and launched itself at another titan. With a powerful, practiced punch, it sent the other titan's head flying through the air in a shower of blood and steam. From the rooftop, Izuku pushed himself up on his elbows, his vision swimming with pain. He watched, his analytical mind kicking into gear, a desperate attempt to focus on anything other than the agony in his legs. The Rogue Titan, as he mentally dubbed it, was a whirlwind of destruction. It wasn't just killing. It was fighting. It used what looked like a trained martial arts stance, protecting its nape, using feints and parries. The remaining soldiers and cadets were terrified. "Another abnormal! It's coming this way!" Someone screamed. "Wait!" Izuku grunted, his voice raspy with pain. He pointed a trembling finger. "Look!" The Rogue Titan stomped on the nape of the Titan it had just decapitated, ensuring the kill. It then turned and sprinted towards another pair of Titans that were closing in on a trapped squad. It was actively hunting other Titans. The pain in Izuku's legs was a roaring fire, but his brain was ice cold. He saw the patterns. He saw the strategy. This wasn't just a mindless monster. He forced himself to sit up, ignoring the shards of bone grinding in his legs. He started shouting, his voice carrying across the rooftops to the terrified soldiers below. "It's ignoring us!" he yelled, his voice cracking with strain. "Its targets are the other Titans! Don't attack it!" A few soldiers looked up at the crazy, green-haired boy on the roof, his legs clearly broken, shouting tactical advice. "Look at its movements!" Izuku continued, his analyst's brain in full command. "It's using a coordinated fighting style. It's protecting its nape. It's showing advanced combat intelligence. It's prioritizing targets that pose the greatest threat to the soldiers." He saw it now. The Rogue Titan wasn't just killing randomly. It was systematically clearing a path, creating a safe zone. It was fighting with a fury that felt familiar, a fury he had seen every day for the past 5 years. It's fighting for us," Armin whispered, finally breaking from his stupor, his intelligent eyes wide with a dawning, impossible realization. Izuku nodded, grimacing as a fresh wave of pain shot up his legs. He lay back down, his body spent, but his mind clearer than ever. They were in the middle of a slaughterhouse, their friends were dead, and he was crippled. But a new, impossible piece had just been slammed onto the board. A monster that fought for humanity. He didn't know what it was, or where it came from. But as he listened to its enraged roars echoing through the blood-soaked streets of Trost, he knew one thing for certain. The battle was not over. It had just become infinitely more complicated. The air in the subterranean courtroom was thick with the stench of fear, old stone, and unwashed bodies. It was a cold, oppressive space, the flickering torchlight casting long, dancing shadows that made monsters of men. In the center of the room, chained to a steel pole like a rabid animal, knelt Eren Yeager. He was alive, miraculously, impossibly, having emerged from the steaming corpse of the Rogue Titan. But his survival was not a cause for celebration. It was a crime he was now forced to answer for. Izuku Midoriya stood in the packed gallery, leaning heavily on a crudely made crutch. His legs were a mess of splints and bandages, the bones having been roughly set by a terrified garrison doctor who had never seen fractures so severe. Every breath sent a jolt of sympathetic pain through his lower body, a constant, grinding reminder of his desperate, reckless choice on that rooftop. The 5% leap had saved Armin, but it had cost him his mobility. The familiar, agonizing price of one for all felt both like a punishment and a bitter homecoming. He watched the proceedings with a cold, analytical detachment, a defense mechanism against the chaotic swirl of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. To his left, Armin was trembling, his face pale and slick with sweat. To his right, Mikasa was a statue of coiled tension, her hand never straying far from where her blades would be, her gaze fixed on Eren with a terrifying, protective intensity. The trial was a farce. It wasn't a search for truth, it was a battle for possession of a weapon. On one side stood the military police, led by the sneering, pragmatic Commander Naldok. They saw Eren as an existential threat, a monster in human skin, a heretical anomaly whose very existence undermined the authority of the king and the sanctity of the walls. Their solution was simple, brutal, and final: dissect him, study him, and then execute him before he could turn on them. On the other side stood the Survey Corps, led by the imposing, blonde Commander Erwin Smith. His face was a mask of calm, strategic composure, but his crystalline blue eyes held a fervent, almost fanatical gleam. He didn't see a monster. He saw a key to understanding the Titans, a key to retaking Wall Maria, a key to the cellar in Shiganshina that he and Izuku had discussed in hushed tones after Grisha Jaeger's mysterious disappearance. His solution was equally simple, though far more dangerous: give Eren to the Survey Corps and unleash him upon their enemies. The arguments raged, a storm of fear-mongering and political maneuvering. A portly merchant, terrified for his profits and property, screamed about the destruction Eren had caused. A priest from the wall cult shrieked about heresy, about defiling the sacred walls with the presence of such an unholy creature. Eren, fueled by a righteous, suicidal fury, played right into their hands. "You're all cowards!" he roared, rattling his chains. "You sit here talking while people are dying. Give me a chance and I'll prove it. I'll use my power to help humanity. My goal is to slaughter every last Titan that..." Naldok raised a hand, a smug smirk playing on his lips. "His goal is to slaughter, he says. We have no guarantee that his rage will not one day be turned upon us. His own words condemn him. He is a cornered animal, and a cornered animal will say anything to survive. I see no other option. We must eliminate the threat." He drew his pistol, the click of the hammer cocking echoing like a death knell in the silent room. Panic erupted. Mikasa's hand tensed. Armin gasped. "Wait!" The voice was not loud. It was not filled with rage or passion. It was calm, clear, and projected with a startling authority that cut through the chaos. Every head in the courtroom turned. Leaning on his crutch, Izuku Midoriya took a painful, deliberate step forward from the gallery. He met the gaze of Darius Zackley, the premier who presided over the proceedings, his face a mask of polite but firm resolve. "Permission to speak, Your Excellency," Izuku said, his voice steady despite the fire in his legs. Zackley, a man with a bizarrely coiffed beard and a weary, calculating expression, looked intrigued. He remembered the reports. This was the boy who had graduated first in his class, the one they called the professor. The one whose legs were shattered from an unexplained rooftop collapse, while he was saving other cadets. "You are Izuku Midoriya of the 104th, are you not?" Zackley asked. "The top graduate." "Very well. The court recognizes you. Speak. But make it relevant," Naldok scoffed. "What can a mere cadet possibly add to this?" Izuku ignored him. He didn't look at Eren, or Mikasa, or even Erwin. He looked directly at the assembly of commanders, merchants, and politicians. He was not here to make an emotional appeal. He was here to present a strategic analysis. "Your Excellency, esteemed commanders," he began, his voice ringing with an eerie confidence. "This entire debate has been framed by emotion. The military police see a monster and react with fear. Cadet Jaeger sees an opportunity and reacts with passion. Both are understandable, but both are strategically flawed perspectives. Let us, for a moment, remove the human element. Let us disregard the fact that the entity in question is Eren Jaeger." He paused, letting the strange premise sink in. "Let us instead refer to it as Asset Titan. And let us analyze Asset Titan not as a person or a monster, but as a weapon system. A strategic asset." The courtroom was utterly silent. The shift in language was jarring, clinical. Erwin Smith's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of profound interest in their depths. Izuku hobbled forward another step, his crutch thumping on the stone floor. He held up his free hand, ticking off points on his fingers. Point 1: Combat Effectiveness. During the battle for Trost, I personally observed Asset Titan in combat for approximately 18 minutes. In that time, it neutralized no fewer than 20 Titans, ranging from 4-meter to 15-meter class. To put that in perspective, the entirety of the Southern garrison and the graduate corps combined likely accounted for a similar number over several hours, with catastrophic casualties. Asset Titan's kill-to-engagement ratio is unprecedented. He took a breath, his gaze sweeping the room. Point 2. Strategic intelligence. Asset Titan does not fight randomly. It prioritizes targets. It actively protected trapped and overwhelmed human soldiers. It demonstrated knowledge of the Titan weakness by repeatedly stomping on the napes of its victims post-incapacitation to ensure a permanent kill. Most importantly, it showed defensive awareness, actively protecting its own nape. This is not a mindless beast. It is a guided weapon with a clear understanding of Titan combat. Guided by what? Niles sneered. A boy who can barely control his own temper? Guided by an instinct to protect humanity, Commander. Izuku countered smoothly, not missing a beat. An instinct that, until we have further data, appears to be hardwired into its very function. Which brings me to my third and most crucial point, controllability and potential. He looked at Eren for the first time, his expression unreadable. The current debate centers on whether we can trust the pilot, Eren Yeager. I argue that this is the wrong question. We don't need to trust him, we need to control him. The reports state that Cadet Yeager sealed the breach in Trost after being given a clear, direct objective. This demonstrates that Asset Titan can be aimed, it can be directed. It can be utilized to achieve specific strategic goals. He turned back to Zackley. Imagine, Your Excellency. We possess a weapon that can seal the broken gates. A weapon that could, theoretically, carry a massive object, like, say, a boulder, with strength far exceeding any engineering capabilities we have. A weapon that can clear a path for our soldiers, that can fight Titans on their own terms. Commander Doc wants to dissect this weapon to see how it works. Commander Smith wants to use it. I propose a third option. Let us study it. In a controlled environment. Let us learn its limits, its triggers, its capabilities. Let us turn this anomaly from a source of fear into a predictable, reliable tool for the reclamation of our territory. He finished, his body trembling from the effort of standing and the intensity of his own words. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. He hadn't defended Eren the person. He had presented a clinical, irrefutable business case for Eren the weapon. He had taken their fear and reframed it as a logistical problem. He had spoken their language, the language of assets, resources, and strategic advantage. Pixis, the commander of the Southern Territories, stroked his chin, a thoughtful smile on his face. Owen Smith's expression was one of deep, undisguised admiration. He had planned to make a similar argument, but Izuku's cold, data-driven presentation had been far more effective than any passionate plea for hope. But the fear was not so easily dispelled. A murmur of dissent began to rise again. It's still a monster! Someone yelled. What if we can't control it? What if it turns on us right now? The tension snapped back into place. Niall raised his pistol again, and then another voice, cold and sharp as breaking glass, cut through the noise. I can control him. All heads turned. From the shadows near the Survey Corps contingent, a short, dark-haired man stepped forward. He moved with a coiled, predatory grace, his expression one of profound boredom, but his eyes held a dangerous, piercing light. It was Captain Levi Ackerman, humanity's strongest soldier. Personally, I don't think he's much of a threat, Levi said, his voice dripping with condescension as he strolled towards the chained Eren. But I understand your concerns, and since your debate is going nowhere, a little demonstration might be in order. Before anyone could react, Levi moved. He was a blur. He delivered a brutal, lightning-fast kick to Eren's face, snapping his head back. A tooth flew through the air. Gasps filled the room. Mikasa let out a choked sound of rage, and it took the combined strength of Armin and a nearby soldier to hold her back. Levi didn't stop. He grabbed Eren by the hair, yanking his head up, and drove a knee into his stomach. He rained down a merciless, systematic beating on the helpless boy, punches, kicks, stomps. It wasn't a fight. It was a calculated, brutal assertion of dominance. You see, Levi said conversationally, his foot planted firmly on Eren's back, grinding his face into the stone floor. Pain and fear are excellent teaching tools. You think he's a monster? Fine, but I'm the one who can put him down. He's a dog that needs to be shown its master. He looked up, his cold gaze sweeping over Nile and the other commanders. So here's the deal. Give him to me. I'll take personal responsibility for him. I'll keep him on a leash, and if he ever steps out of line, if he ever even thinks about turning into a titan without orders, I will kill him myself. It's a risk, I admit, but it's a hell of a lot more promising than turning him into a martyr on your dissection table. He looked over at Erwin, who gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The plan was in motion. Then, Levi's gaze drifted to the side. It landed on Izuku, who was watching the brutal display not with horror, but with a chillingly focused, analytical stare. Izuku wasn't watching the violence. He was studying Levi's technique, his speed, his efficiency. Levi saw the brilliant, calculating mind behind the boy's eyes, the same mind that had just silenced the entire command structure with a single speech. Zachary brought his gavel down. The decision has been made. Custody of Eren Yeager is hereby transferred to the Survey Corps, under the direct supervision of Special Operations Squad Captain Levi. He looked at Levi. If there is an incident, your entire regiment will be held accountable. Erwin Smith stepped forward. We accept these terms, Your Excellency. As the trial concluded and soldiers began to move Eren, Levi walked over to Erwin. His gaze, however, was still fixed on Izuku, who was now being helped by Armin. That one, Levi said, his voice a low murmur meant only for Erwin. The green-haired brat with the broken legs, Izuku Midoriya, Erwin supplied. A remarkable mind. He's more than that, Levi countered. He watches a man get beaten half to death and he analyzes it like it's a math problem. There's something off about him. Something dangerous. Levi paused, then made a decision. When it's time to choose regiments, I want him. Erwin raised an eyebrow. He's a cadet. A crippled one at that. I don't care. The brat with the titan in him, and the other brat who thinks he can control it. I'll take them both, Levi stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. One is a monster of rage, the other is a monster of a different kind. I'll keep them both where I can see them. A week later, Izuku found himself in a carriage, the gentle rocking a constant, agonizing vibration against his still healing legs. He was being transported to the Survey Corps' headquarters, a repurposed castle in the hinterlands. He had officially joined their ranks, his transfer expedited by a personal request from Commander Erwin himself. He was not alone. In the carriage with him, bruised but healing rapidly, was Eren. Across from them sat the members of the legendary Special Operations Squad, an elite unit handpicked by Captain Levi. There was the calm and competent Gunther Schultz, the fiery and passionate ELD Jin, the kind-hearted and slightly anxious Petra Ral, and the gruff, pragmatic Aluo Bozato, who was doing a cringe-worthy imitation of Levi's speech patterns. The atmosphere was thick with tension. They were all staring at Eren, sizing up the monster they had been saddled with. But their gazes kept flickering to Izuku, the strange, crippled analyst who had been inexplicably attached to their squad. So, Aluo began, leaning forward in a poor mimicry of Levi's posture. You're the famous professor. The one who talked his way into the Survey Corps without even being able to stand on his own 2 feet. Don't expect any special treatment here, brat. I don't, Izuku replied quietly, his eyes focused on the notebook in his lap. He was already working, sketching out potential training regimens for Eren, cross-referencing them with his observations of Asset Titan's combat style. Petra offered a kind, if wary, smile. We were all very impressed with your speech at the trial, Midoriya. It was very logical. Thank you, Izuku said, not looking up. Logic is the only thing that makes sense in this world. The carriage fell into an awkward silence, broken only by Eren shifting uncomfortably. I wanted to thank you, Izuku, Eren mumbled, looking at the floor. For what you said. For defending me. I didn't defend you, Eren, Izuku corrected, his voice still neutral. He finally looked up, his green eyes meeting Eren's. I presented a cost-benefit analysis of your strategic value. My loyalty is to the mission, the survival and advancement of humanity. Right now, you are the most valuable asset in service of that mission. My goal is to ensure that asset is utilized to its maximum potential and not squandered by fear or ignorance. The cold, clinical words hung in the air. The rest of the squad exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the talk of a soldier. It wasn't the talk of a hero. It was the talk of a spymaster, a general, a man who saw people as pieces on a chessboard. They had been tasked with watching one monster, but now it seemed they had two. Finally, they arrived at the castle. It was old, imposing, and surprisingly clean. Levi's obsession with cleanliness was legendary, and it showed. As they disembarked, Captain Levi himself was there to greet them, his arms crossed, his expression one of perpetual disapproval. His cold eyes landed on Aaron first. "Let's be clear, Jaeger. You're a monster. I'm your keeper. You step one toe out of line, and I'll put you down. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Aaron gulped, intimidated. Levi's gaze then shifted to Izuku, who was carefully maneuvering himself out of the carriage with his crutch. "And you?" "Midoriya, Captain." Izuku acknowledged with a respectful nod. "Erwin seems to think you're some kind of genius," Levi said, walking a slow circle around him. "He thinks your brain is a weapon we can use. I'm not so sure. I think you're a creepy little brat with too many secrets." Izuku met his gaze without flinching. "I am loyal to the mission, Captain. My only goal is to provide any strategic or analytical support that will contribute to humanity's victory." Levi stopped in front of him, so close Izuku could see the dark circles under his eyes. "That's what they all say. But your little power surge on the rooftop in Trost, the reports were very interesting. A flash of green light. An impossible jump. Shattered legs. It doesn't sound like a roof collapse to me." Izuku's blood ran cold, but his face remained a blank mask. "I was desperate to save my comrade, sir. Adrenaline can make people do incredible things." Levi stared at him for a long, silent moment, his eyes searching for any crack in Izuku's facade. He found none. "Fine. Keep your secrets. For now." He turned to the rest of his squad. "ELD, Gunther, you're on first watch for Jaeger. Petra, show him to his quarters. In the dungeon. Alyo, you're on stable duty. You've been biting your tongue so much I'm worried you'll swallow it." He then gestured towards a different part of the castle. "Midoriya, you're with me." He led Izuku not to a barracks or a cell, but to a dusty, forgotten room that looked like it had once been a library. It was filled with old shelves and decaying books. "This is yours," Levi said. "Erwin thinks your brain is best put to use surrounded by information. You'll work from here. Your job is to analyze all incoming reports, consolidate all of our existing data on Titans, and formulate new strategies. You'll report directly to me and Erwin. You are, for all intents and purposes, the Survey Corps' first official intelligence analyst." He then gestured to a small cot in the corner. "You sleep here too. I want you where I can see you. Close to me, close to Jaeger. One of you is a monster of rage, a bomb waiting to go off, and the other..." He looked at Izuku, his eyes narrowed. "You're a monster of a different kind. Quiet, cold, and always thinking. I don't know which of you is more dangerous. But I'll be watching you both." Levi turned and left, the heavy wooden door closing with a definitive thud, leaving Izuku alone in the dusty room. He slowly made his way to a large, oak table in the center, the only piece of furniture that wasn't covered in a thick layer of dust. He looked around at the decaying books, the forgotten knowledge, the silent history of this world. He looked down at his shattered legs, a testament to the devastating power he was struggling to reclaim. He thought of Aaron, chained in the dungeon below. Levi was right. They were two different kinds of monsters, both now caged in the same castle, both tools in Erwin Smith's grand, desperate gamble. Aaron was their sword, and Izuku, with his notebooks, his analysis, and his own monstrous, secret power, was being forged into their scalpel. The war had a new front, and it was being fought not just on the battlefield, but in the minds of the monsters humanity had been forced to embrace.